Christian parenting.
Welcome back to Part of the Mess, Sissy Goff.
Woo! We're so happy.
Well, she's sleeping. I was going to get Maisie to say hi in light of today's conversation, but do you guys have your new puppies around? Are they in the room? Give me a little shout out.
Mine is not in the room. We wouldn't even be able to have a conversation if she were in the room.
That might be
Patches.
true. Patches is here. Say hi, Aunt Courtney.
Oh my gosh. And David, what's the name of your new dog?
Her name is June, but
And she has some issues?
that's her given name. We refer to her as weapon of mass destruction. When she comes near you, we start yelling, incoming. It's like a love missile coming at you at all times.
So that must just add extra fun to the office. It's like, I don't know. Is it a lab? Is that right?
She's a lab, yes.
Okay, so what happens? Does that dog settle down or what is the deal here?
They usually somewhere between 3 and 5 years, and we're at 8 months right now. So we have a little stretch of road ahead of us before she is well suited for the work of therapy dog. She's got some additional training.
I love it. We're going to get into, we love having you here. I love having you here. I love you guys. But we're going to get into 3 core needs for every kid, which I'm like, sign me up. And we're going to give the disclaimers that this isn't the list. There's like many core needs of kids, but we want you to just give us a few just to think about, because I think I get overwhelmed. I mean, especially like physical needs. I'm like, they need dentist appointment and they need my hugs and they need my attention. They, all the things. So I think we just boil it down to a few. But let's talk about dogs first. Does every kid need a dog or what?
Yes.
Okay, and you
Goldfish
convinced me.
don't do the same thing.
Okay, why is it? In all seriousness, you actually convinced me, and I have some theories of my own, but I was anti-dog. So all the people that are listening with their kids in the car are like turning this off immediately. They're like, no, but there is some reason. So Sissy, why don't you start? Why do you think dogs make such a difference in your practice, but also in families that you see?
Well, there's so much science behind even the chemicals that are released in our brains as we pet dogs. And 30 plus years of counseling kids, we just have seen time and again the difference they make. I would say 2 primary examples, and then David, I want you to jump in. One is, I think in this world, girls in particular are meaner than they've ever been.
Yeah.
And so for a child, an adolescent, to have somebody that they walk in the door and they greet them. I mean, somebody was telling me this about their puppy yesterday, that when their kids come in the door, the dog just loses its mind every time.
Yeah, it's so true.
And then I will never forget a girl that I saw years ago who had lost her dad. And she said to me, the person I talk to the most about my dad is my dog. Not have any idea, that her dog wasn't a person in that moment. But I love that. I mean, I just think they do immeasurable good in the lives of us all, but especially kids.
Yeah.
David, what would you
how
add?
do you see it affect your family or your clients that you see?
I wholeheartedly agree. And I think the only things I'd add would be that I think it's a great context for teaching kids responsibility and being more other-centered. And every one of us knows they're going to pass in and out of different stages where they can become self-absorbed and consumed with themselves. And so I think attending vet visits and being a part of training, like, it just moves kids outward in a really needed and necessary way. Courtney, as Sissy was talking, I was thinking it is fascinating for any family listening to do a deep dive into all the different ways it impacts us. And one of the stories I tell in the children's book is about Owen going to Vanderbilt Children's Hospital, our local children's hospital. And this is a true story, he was a part of a study with multiple children's hospitals around the country looking at the health benefits when kids interact with dogs.
Wow.
And it's legit. Like, it was fascinating. So they would, to Sissy's great point, not only swab saliva from the kids, but from the dogs. And the dogs were benefiting from being with the kids. The kids were benefiting from being with the dogs.
Amazing.
Like, we just all win.
Amazing.
Like, it lowered heart rate, all the different ways that it improves our well-being. So we're huge advocates.
Yeah. And I think I've told this story. It's really Sissy's. I was like, I don't want a dog. Do I have to get a dog in? But Larson was she had a lot of fear. She had a huge dog get in her face when she was about 2. And it's crazy that it really marked something in her. And over time, I wasn't a dog person, so I didn't get her around dogs enough for that like concern and fear to diminish. It actually got bigger. And so as she was getting 8, 9, 10, she was still climbing up me if we go to someone's house, like wouldn't get out of the car and freaking out. And I was like, Dad, this is getting way worse. And so you said, okay, probably about 10 sessions of cognitive behavioral therapy or get a dog. And I was like, so we
about the same
did.
price.
We did, exactly. We did get Maisie, right? Because as COVID started, it was perfect timing for our family. And I've become obsessed, and she's just the sweetest
Mm.
thing. And so, as I'm saying this, I'm thinking y'all both lost your dogs recently. And I don't think I ever gave compassion or empathy. So, I publicly want to apologize to any of my friends that I didn't like text. But when I heard about Sweet
Did.
Lucy and Owen, I think I did text y'all because that's part of your
Yes, you
family.
did.
So, we'll use Sissy start with just your dogs and then how this even moved into new children's books for y'all in this season.
Yeah, so dogs have long been a part of our counseling practice. And I don't know that I've ever even told you this story, Courtney, but the first dog that was ever at Daystar was my first dog, Noelle, who was
Oh,
a mall. And I, for some reason, had workmen at my house or something that day. And so I had to take Noelle with me to work. And I met with a girl who ended up saying to me that she wanted to take her own life, which, is the worst case scenario in our
yeah.
work. And then the next worst case scenario for her mother is I had to call her mom and have her mom come in. And so I had her mom come and I had to leave her to go meet with her mom to prep her. And so I left Noelle with this girl. And when I walked out of the room, I was so worried about just even her sitting her in that room by herself. And I walked back in and Noelle was in her lap licking her tears. And I told Melissa, our director, about it. And she said, bring her every day. And
Wow.
we now have, David, is it 6 dogs on staff
Yes.
at Daystar?
That's so cool.
Helping with kids, which is amazing. And we have for years said, wouldn't it be fun to write a series of books called the Daystar Dog series?
It's so
And
cute.
we have an editor who has become a dear friend, and he said yes. And so we have our first 2 coming out in May, and we're so excited. And they are really based on 2 of the topics that we're most concerned about, speaking of core needs with kids today. And mine is about courage and helping even young kids work through anxiety. And David, you could say what Owen's is about.
Yeah. Owen's book is about resilience, which I would say, Courtney, to your great question, would be one of the first core needs I would identify for kids, I think, is taking what Sissy and I call healthy risk, which I think is fertile ground for building resilience. And we're seeing less evidence of that happening with kids than any other time in 3 decades of doing this work. I've never seen as many, I'll speak to it for boys, as few boys who are interested in signing up for a club or a sports team when they're in elementary school, as few adolescent boys as are interested in asking a girl to a homecoming dance, getting their driver's license, taking the ACT, applying to college. And that's not to say college is the end all be all for every kid, but I don't want to see kids closing doors from the front side of development that by the time they get to adolescence, it's like those bigger doors to walk through don't feel like options. And so this book felt so important to talk about healthy risk on the front side. And I tell a funny story in the book about Owen that when we went to the Children's Hospital, he was overwhelmed by, the machines and all these people, doctors and nurses wearing white coats. And he was a 75-pound dog. I had to carry him in the first room, literally like pick this enormous dog up because he so wanted to be with a kid, but he was overwhelmed by all those machines and, different things that were running from the machines. And had he not been able to push through, experience that healthy risk of going in the room, he would have missed being with this amazing kid who I am convinced is who convinced him that this is good work you're doing. And it, next time we went into a room, I did less caring and more nudging and then less caring and more nudging. And so finally the guy would bound into a room, but that's not how it started. But I think had he never taken that risk, he would have missed the magic of what happened in that room that day.
David,
for
why
him
do you
and
think
the boy.
that's changed? Why were we a little more open to risk than this generation is? Is it safety? Is it like just bar the door, keep them safe kind of thing?
Well, I think there certainly were some things we could all 3 agree our parents might have missed, well-intentioned parents might have missed. But one thing I think they were Olympic gold medalists at was sending all 3 of us outside on a summer day and saying, go ride your bike, go roller skate, shoot hoops, whatever. And we'll see you at dinner.
Drink from the hose.
Drink from the hose, absolutely. And figure out what to do. And all 3 of us, I would argue, are pretty resourceful adults because we experience a lot of healthy risks. Now, obviously, it was a different day and time. And I think to Jonathan Haidt's great argument in The Anxious Generation, we have done a lot of coddling in previous years in ways that we don't invite kids into healthy risk. We're standing in the way of healthy risk sometimes. So
Yes.
I think it's needed and necessary because, again, the stakes will only get higher.
I love that. So we have a neighbor that goes to our school, and at our school we do Bible buddies. So and it used to be my girls had an older Bible buddy, and they thought that was the coolest thing. So they'd meet from the two different schools. The high schooler would come over to elementary, and they'd study a piece of scripture and talk, and they just thought it was the greatest one. Now my girls are the Bible buddy to little girls, and it's crazy.
I bet they're amazing.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
And so the little girl for Larson happens to live in our neighborhood, and she is smitten with Lars. And she said, on a snow day, can Larson come over and play? Now Larson's just turned 16, and she called it. I was like, where are you? She's like, I can't leave. She won't let me leave. 3 hours later, she's still playing in the snow. And all that to say, that mom who I love, Robin, read The Anxious Generation, and she felt the same way, that she just realized, oh my gosh, I don't put them in these situations. And I think her girls are like 7 and 9 maybe. And so she texted me a few days later and said, hey, they're on their way to your house by themselves. And I'm so nervous. And I said, she was like, I was like, hey, that's all a part of the learning. It's like, what do you do when you walk to someone's house and they're not there? So that is a great one. Okay, healthy risk. We can do this. And it sounds like at all ages. It's not just kindergarten.
Absolutely.
It's high school.
With littles, let's practice going to day camp. And then let's practice going to overnight camp. And then let's practice all the different ways that I think kids can experience healthy risk and where they feel so capable and competent when they do.
Okay. I love it. So that's our first one. We'll say healthy risk. Sissy, I think you alluded to one earlier, but what's another core need?
Yeah. Well, I love the idea of risk because that feels outward, like something we're supposed to move toward. And what enables us to take healthy risk is courage. Which feels more like an innate trait.
Right.
And we need to speak that into the lives of the kids that we love. And again, I think we're doing that to a lesser degree than ever before. I mean, we have talked about the rates of anxiety, but the average age of onset used to be 8. Now we're seeing it drop to 6 with signs as young as 4 and 5.
Wow.
So we need to start as early as we possibly can. And David and I would say in all things, early intervention makes the biggest difference. And so we have loaded these books with practical tools, things we talk about with kids in our office, but also practical tools. And so mine is on courage because girls are struggling with anxiety like never before. Now, books are for boys and girls, but at the same time, I think we need to lean in, especially in that space with girls, and remind them that they're capable, that they really can do hard things, and that it's not that they have to rise to doing hard things, but God has placed courage inside of them. He has placed capability inside of them.
So it's less, let me think this through. So you're not saying just walk around the house saying, you are brave, you are brave. It's like, how are ways do we call it out when we see them being brave? Do we put them in situations where they can show that they're brave? Is that what you're meaning, dear friend Sissy? My words are just not happening today.
Well, you've had a stressful morning.
The internet was out, folks.
Yes, to give them opportunities, to remind them that they can, remind them when they have, all of those things. We need to be saying it over and over and over. And the crux of the Little Lucy book is that Lucy discovers her courage when she realizes how loved she is by me and by God. And I think that is the truth of the identity of who we are, that we are so capable. Kids are so capable of doing hard things because God has given them what they need. Yeah. And part of that is us in relationship, in proximity to us. And that we get to remind them of those truths. We get to remind them of their identity that I think can give them the confidence to move toward risk, as David's talking about, and resilience.
One thing I think, honestly, as a parent that I do to kibosh that courage is I critique too quick. So say I'm like, go try that thing. And then as soon as they come back in the door, I'm like, well, did you do that? Did you do that? And I'm like critiquing the thing. And then you'd watch their little spirits like crush. And I have to watch that even now as Ella's preparing to go to Auburn. She'll want to say something about her dorm and she's 18. And I'm like, or like rush. And I'm like just marching in like this expert. And so I notice that about myself, but I think probably other moms, do you see that in your practice as well as you're like, let them try it. Let them try things.
And when we do things for them, I think we feel like we're helping, but the message they get is we don't believe they can.
That's right. That's right. That's
So,
exactly how Ella worded it yesterday. It's like, I think she said, "You think I'm an idiot." It was more of her language, but that's what she was saying. It's
yeah.
like, you don't think I can do this, which is,
Which, Courtney, what a gift that she feels safe enough to say those words out
yeah,
loud to you.
yeah.
You know?
Well, and we'll get to a third one, but I was going to tell, as we started, I was telling David, he's like, "How are you?" And I'm like, "Well, we're in the senior year." And so asking for a friend, is it normal that there's a little more tension this year? Like, we had such a good year relationally last year. And I feel like there's this pushback where it's like, whoa. And so she's ready to go. I'm ready for her to go almost. Cause I'm like, whoa, is that a natural part, David, that they're just like, we're ready to be independent? We're pushing back a little bit.
I think A, it's natural, and B, it's the importance of leaning into this is unfamiliar territory for both
Yeah.
of you. She's
Yeah.
never launched. You've never launched a first.
Yeah.
Sissy and I have had conversation about we both have strong memories of having more conflict with our moms senior year and summer of senior year before we
Yeah.
went away than the other years combined. And
Yeah.
my mom and I had an incredible relationship, but it felt like we were in this unfamiliar territory. We were
Yeah.
experiencing a lot of emotions, both of us, and it was easy to get sideways over really insignificant things in
Yeah,
different
that's
moments.
what it
And
is. It's like,
I
are we
feel
really fighting
certain.
over? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. I
Okay.
feel certain by the time August rolled around, she probably said to my dad, "Take him by yourself if you'd like."
That's
And I wouldn't have
amazing.
faulted her if she did.
But and like my confession is, I'm just realizing some misses, and I think I've been a great mom, but it's like some things are bubbling up that you're like, I do feel like I showed up for my kids, but some of those gaps or things I would have done differently are so much easier to see now as they're 18 than looking back. And so I think that would be a flag I would wave to parents, is like, just don't be so critical, because they're
Yes.
trying and they're trying.
I met with a couple last week, and this mom is like we are. I think she's really resilient. She's trying so hard all the time, and she's trying to get parenting right more
Yeah.
than probably anything she ever has in her life. And I could tell is probably critical more than she's relational with her daughter. And so I kept saying, I want you to think about connecting more than correcting, connecting more
Yes.
than correcting. Because some of us just lean towards more correction than connection.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think when we haven't been doing that, we can always go back and apologize and say, hey, I want to do this differently. So let's work together. And
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
graciously and gently remind me when I'm living in that space.
Yes, and it is a beautiful thing for them to be able enough to have those conversations and to go like,
Yes.
the way that you spoke, not
Yeah.
okay, but I understand
Yeah.
the pushback, and so it's it's an interesting phase. So that's why I look a little
Yeah.
star-eyed and nauseous over here. Okay, one more core need for every kid. Who wants to go?
I would say, Courtney, I think if we were to throw one more out there, I think we would both say relationships, and we could talk about it unique to girls and boys. But I would say, even back to that example I threw out a few minutes ago of, fewer boys being a part of a team, which means opportunities to interact and have conflict and work through difficult moments, and asking a girl on a dance. I've seen more high school boys who are paralyzed at the idea of sitting across the table at dinner with a girl and carrying the conversation. I think I have 1,000 thoughts about how many adolescent boys have been wearing a headset and doing the majority of their interacting in that way, which means they haven't had to read nonverbal cues. They've missed that fumbling of the ball that happens when the conversation gets kind of stilted and I've got to figure out how to move the ball forward. And so all of that practice that I think is foundational, because, we talked a lot collectively as a culture about how concerned we were for kids academically during the pandemic and the lags we'd probably see in the cognitive space. I don't think we talked enough about what we're seeing now, which is a lot of lags in kids' social development of all ages, and where I think we're going to be playing catch up in that space for some time. But I want to see greater evidence of that for boys of all ages. Sissy, what would you say about girls and relationships?
Yeah, I love that you use that word. I mean, I would add to that. And I was meeting, so David and I are meeting with clients still, and we're also doing supervision with some of our younger counselors on staff. And I was supervising one of the girls yesterday, and she said, what is it about 10 to 12-year-old girls right now that feel like they're struggling so much socially? It feels like something's wrong. And then we tracked back, and those kids were in kindergarten and first grade during the pandemic.
Wow. Wow.
When you think about, you're learning, how do you go up and smile and say, will you play with me on the playground? You're learning how to handle when someone doesn't want to play with you. I mean, all those things I'm watching my nephew Henry grapple with this year in kindergarten, they weren't getting to do. And so these girls are, as David said, to his great point, they are lagging behind developmentally. They don't know how to initiate conversation. They don't know how to ask someone a question, be interested in somebody else, answer, but not answer in 45-minute, increment. And so it feels like it more than ever, we need to be doing a lot of practicing basic social skills with kids, giving them opportunities to do that, having play dates, observing those play dates, and then talking it through with them later, because they're going to catch up, but to what cost along the way? And so what can we do to shore up some of what they missed?
Yes.
In this
I
season?
love that you said practicing and observing. I've always been the house where people come. I've always been the car that picks up all the kids, but I love it. But it's also, I get to see so much intel on my kids and how they act around different friends. And I'm like pretending I have AirPods in, but I'm like listening to the whole thing. And you learn so much about these kids. And even senior spring break, I watched my girls interact with these 4 friends. And I watched them one night. They were all kind of tired and they were all just staring at their phones. And I was like, golly, like, how can they not? But they're great people. But they also opened the box of Yahtzee. And when I tell you Yahtzee has become their obsession, I was trained fully in it last night. There's like screaming. There is trash talking. Ron's like, this game is ridiculous. I'm like, get in here. We're playing Yahtzee. But all that today,
Good, Courtney.
Thank you. But I do think those practice moments are so helpful. And I remember even when my girls were little and I would expect them to play upstairs for like hours and not have a fight. And I would just be blogging like I had the most important job ever. And this one counselor was like, you need to kind of watch them play and see what's happening. And as I spent just a little bit of time observing them, I was like, oh, every time Larson takes a jab like this and then Ella steals the toy and there was like so I love that you said that, because I do think we can get overwhelmed with the problem and go, my kids are so behind, but then we go practically, what do we do? So play dates, observing, all that. David, anything practically there you'd say for boys that you'd echo?
Well, you know what I loved about what you just said, Courtney, is you're naming the normal back and forth that I think are some of those foundational social skills that we do tend to interfere. Like we'll step in and start refereeing early on, knowing that that's actually where a lot of the skill development happens. I'm fascinated by how many boys will over-label a conflict or a relationship. He didn't want to be my friend. And the reality is he just didn't want to keep playing what you were interested in playing. You know,
so
it's like,
good.
he's not cutting off relationship. This is the back and forth. This is reciprocity. And so
that's right.
I think watch for that as our kids. I don't want to say our kids aren't reliable reporters. They are. And yet sometimes we're seeing greater evidence than ever. They're over-labeling things. And I think a lot of adolescents are pathologizing normal experiences too. You know, they're describing a relationship as toxic, and it may not meet the criteria for a toxic relationship. It just may be an uncomfortable relationship in the moment, or we're having to navigate some discomfort.
Probably. You heard the word bully. Yeah. Yes. Which is probably in some cases true, but probably, like you said, they didn't want to play the thing. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's back to your wisdom of just let's observe. Let's observe and listen.
Yeah. Love it. All right, guys, thank you so much. Anything else? So these books are for little kids, but as I looked at them, I was like, this is helpful language. Like even that Max Lucado book years ago with the stars and the stripes and that, I was like, I've read that to adult kids. It's like all these things can give us language to have these conversations. And I love that you can use a dog, because you're not like, hey, Larson, the time that you weren't brave. It's like, let's look how cute the story is about Lucy and what she learned.
Well, and I want to circle back to another book, because as we're thinking about connecting over correcting, I think there's a very important book that I assume all of your listeners have, but feels especially important to say today. In This House We Will Giggle is a must read for everyone on the planet. Yes, we think the Lucy book and the Owen book can be helpful, and you can get all 3 on Amazon.
Oh my gosh, y'all are hilarious. Okay, I did mean to ask you. So back in the day, and I don't know which book it was in, but on your podcast, I've referred so many moms, the stages and phases. So it's like, what do we know about this stage, you know, a girl or a boy? And then how can we, I forget how y'all worded it, but is that in a book as well that they can go by? Because I think if you're in 2nd grade, you're like, my kid's scared every night. And I'm like, no, it's normal. They're on track. Is it in that book? Which one?
There's 3 options for that.
Okay,
so
perfect.
We've got a podcast season called Ages and Stages, where we track through what's going on with boys, what's going on with girls, what do they need uniquely. And then I have a book on boys called Wild Things, The Art of Nurturing Boys. Sissy and Melissa have a great book called Raising Girls, where we break down the stages of development.
Okay.
Or we've got an online course where we teach through that. So if you're more of a listener, a reader, or a watcher, we've got 3 different options of how you could engage that content.
That's so helpful. I really have gone back to that time and time again, even with my nieces, because you're like, this is a new phase, and then you freak out and you think your kids, something's wrong with them, and then you read y'all stuff and you're like, they're acting like a second grader. Like, look at that. It's amazing.
Yes.
It's so encouraging. So I love your work. I love you guys. Please come to Texas
We love
for
you.
tacos.
We love
so
you,
soon.
friend.
All
Can
right,
never be
later.
with you enough.
Hugs and kisses. Bye.
Hugs and kisses to Maisie, too.
Okay, bye.
Christian parenting.